A change to how Companion works, plus multiple bannings in Standard? Looks like we've got a lot to talk about today. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about the brand new banned and restricted update listing for Standard and Historic, affecting both those formats, and also addressing what's going on with Companion specifically, because they are changing the way the Companion mechanic works. Now, I was actually surprised by the choice that they made here. Let's dive into what it is. The new Companion rule says, once per game, anytime you could cast a sorcery, you can pay 3 generic mana to put your Companion from your sideboard into your hand as a special action. So now, instead of being able to cast it from your sideboard directly, you are required to transfer it to your hand before casting it. So it's going to basically up the cost of this card by 3 mana, and also, depending on the circumstances, allow for more hand interaction, in that if you want to be able to, let's say you've got a Companion that costs 3 to cast. Normally you'd be able to play it on the 3rd turn. With this new setup, on the 3rd turn, you're going to be able to pay 3 mana to put it in your hand. But then there's a turn where if your opponent has, let's say for example, discard, they'll be able to make you discard it. If they have counter magic, they're going to be able to prepare for you casting the Companion. So it does slow the whole thing down. Now, is this enough? That's an excellent question. I don't rightly know. The reason behind this, now we're gonna get into their logic here. You know what, in case you don't know what Companions are, which seems just absolutely insane, I'll toss a couple of Companions up on the screen for you to look at while I go ahead and read out to the announcement for you, because otherwise you're just gonna watch me stare off to the side for a long period of time. And I know that you guys all come here to just kind of stare lovingly into my eyes. So, you know, I'll do you a favor. Have some pretty cards to look at, all right? So, the rules change for Companions. Here is the reasoning listed by Wizards. While Magic rules changes aren't normally a part of the banned and restricted list updates, in this case we're introducing a change to the Companion mechanic that is motivated by game balance and metagame share across play environments. Effective with this update, the Companion mechanic and all cards featuring it will now work differently from before. The new version of the mechanic will work as follows. Once per game, anytime you could cast a sorcery during your main phase when the stack is empty, you can pay 3 generic mana to put your Companion from your sideboard into your hand. This is a special action, not an activated ability. It happens immediately and can't be responded to. It cannot be countered or stopped by cards like Phyrexian Revoker. Our reason for making this change is based on metagame data and play rates of Companion decks across all formats, and on player feedback on repetitive gameplay patterns. Obviously, we all know playing the same games over and over and over, the same decks, playing out the same way over and over it's very dull, to say the least. As a group, decks using Companions have too high of win rates and metagame share in Standard, Pioneer, and Modern, and have already necessitated bans in Legacy and Vintage. And I don't believe that the change to the Companion rule is going to have them go and turn around in the future and unban the Companions that have already been banned in Vintage. I believe those bans are going to stand regardless of the reworked Companion mechanic. Now, the article continues, this trend represents a long-term problem for the health and diversity of all formats. Rather than go down the path of making several individual adjustments to the banned list for each format, we feel the better solution is to reduce the advantage gained from using a Companion across the board. So depower Companions because they're too powerful. The result we intend is to reduce the metagame share of Companion decks while still capturing the spirit of the mechanic's design and still having Companions be worth building around in many cases. We expect that this new version of the Companion mechanic will result in a deck building challenge and means of self-expression that some players can opt into, rather than being a huge part of the competitive metagame. And here we touch on, in this part of the article there, I believe what they're touching on is the fact that they're trying to create a Commander-esque part of Standard at the very least, because they recognize that Commander is a great driver of sales, and people who play that kind of casual, individualistic style of Magic tend to stick around longer. So I believe that that is what they're trying to harness here. Clearly, they went too far with it. I'm going to be real. Honestly, the idea of trying to bring in deck building challenges and means of self-expression in Magic is definitely a welcome concept. Obviously, it's not going to be welcome when it's done in a way that unbalances everything, but I think it's actually a perfectly reasonable goal to bring into the game. There are certainly complaints people have about them trying to kind of turn Standard into Commander, and forcing it down everybody's throat isn't the way to go, but making it an option doesn't seem like a negative when it can be done in a balanced way. You know, that's how I feel about it. So the article continues, we discussed several alternative rules changes, but ultimately settled on this one as it best mitigates the potential for repetitive gameplay and provides a wider window of interaction. By charging additional mana, playing a companion becomes less efficient relative to playing the other cards the player has drawn. In this way, players are more likely to cast their other spells before their companion, resulting in more divergent game paths. Next, this additional mana will often slow the companion down by a turn, allowing the opponent to interact with it while in the companion player's hand, or otherwise giving the opponent an additional turn to plan ahead before the companion hits the battlefield. It's rare that we use a rules change to address metagame balance, and this isn't something we have plans to do in the future. In this case, the issue wasn't with one individual card, but rather the companions as a group. We believe this solution is preferable to potentially needing to make multiple bans across different formats over time. So I agree that changes obviously were needed to Companion. You couldn't leave Companion running rampant. It was obviously really just making Standard feel even more stagnant. Part of the problem with Standard is that it doesn't have nearly as many cards as the bigger formats. So you don't have as many options to go to in the first place. So that leads to playing Standard to already feel somewhat repetitive. But the Companions broke that threshold to the point where it went from repetitive to monotonous. And that is not where you want to end up. Now, I genuinely don't know exactly how much of this mechanical change is going to impact Companion, or if we're going to be having another discussion about this shortly, where they actually come back to the table and say, okay, we tried that as a fix, we're going to try something else. Depending on how this turns out, maybe they are planning on making Companion a more long-term thing in Magic the Gathering. Maybe it's not just about salvaging these cards from Ikoria, but also something they want to make an ongoing, regular part of Magic the Gathering. So we'll see how that turns out. Now, turning to the bans, we have a couple of different cards in Standard that have gotten banned. And the first of the Standard bans is Fires of Invention. Now, I mean, I did a video a long time ago talking about how Fires of Invention was a dangerous card in terms of anything that allows you to ignore the casting cost of cards can be a real problem. And I mean, in one way, sure, you can say Fires of Invention doesn't ignore casting costs because you can only cast spells for free that are equal to or less than the number of lands you have out. So in the most technical sense, that's right, but it kind of defeats the heart of what I'm getting at. And that is that casting costs are the fundamental balancing tool for power of cards, right? That's how you balance out the strength of a card, by having a casting cost that's more restrictive. The more powerful the card, the more restrictive the casting cost. When you throw that concept out and go, it's free now, you've tossed away your balancing. So unless there are strong protections in place to stop that from getting out of whack, you'll run into issues. And this is what I talked about, like when Throne of Eldraine came out, actually. I pointed at this card and said, this one is going to be a problem because it lets you get multiple free spells. It's pretty crazy. It is emblematic of the pushed power level that we're seeing. A lot of the cards that are made as a result of that don't tend to be a problem, but the outliers tend to be big problems. And that's Fires of Invention. So Wizards has banned Fires of Invention, and they're coming in saying, over the course of the last several weeks, Fires of Invention decks have risen to have a dominant win rate and metagame presence in Standard, achieving a 55% win rate and having even or favorable matchups against each of the other top 10 archetypes. Are there really... I mean, I don't play Standard that much, really, guys. And when I do, it's on Arena with the big, like 250 card tower or green deck. But are there really 10 other decks that people are playing in standard aside from Fires of Invention? Because it doesn't feel that way. Like whenever I play standard, it feels like there's maybe 3 or 4 decks, if you're lucky, that are the different decks that people are playing. Like, am I just not in touch and there actually are 11 different decks in standard right now? Like that are the top ones? That sounds inaccurate to me. I don't know. That's again, I'm not an expert on it. Let's just continue onward. So it says, this indicates that the metagame forces alone are not sufficient to keep the deck in check. In addition, as we craft and test future environments, we found the card Fires of Invention to be a significant design and balance constraint. Yeah, there we go. This is just backing up what I'm saying about how casting costs are the fundamental balancing part of Magic the Gathering. And as soon as you throw those out the window, you run into issues. When you're designing cards and you go, every card you design, go, wait, you can Fires of Invention this out for free. Wait, you can play everything in this deck and play it all for free. We can't make this. It'll be too busted with fires. We can't make this. It'll be too busted with fires. You know? That honestly, it makes you wonder how that wouldn't have been self-evident when they made the card. Just because, I mean, they are the guys who make Magic, and they've had tons of encounters with issues when you make things free. Like, almost all the bannings involve like colorless cards and things that make things free. That's it. These huge advantage engines. And you got to push the boundaries. You got to sit there and you got to try new things. But the Fires of Invention one, it feels like a real obvious one. What are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? Because of the flexible nature of the cost reduction effect, Fires of Invention decks would continue to gain power as new high mana cost spells are added to the environment. As new sets have been released, we've seen the win rates of Fires of Invention decks increase compared to past standard metagame environments. Because of the Fire Invention deck's current high win rate and metagame share, and the risks and design constraints it poses to the environment going forwards, Fires of Invention is banned in standard. And that's, you know what, most of the time when they talk about bannings, they don't talk about how one card is making it so they can't make other cards. That is not normal language that you will find in a ban announcement. So that is different. This whole situation, honestly, there's a bunch of stuff going on. I don't know if Wizards decided to kind of say, you know what, we're going to shake things up. Let's throw out some of our rule book. Let's just pretend we didn't learn certain things in the past, and we'll go forwards with that. Another example is the next card we're going to talk about, and that's Agent of Treachery getting banned. Now, Agent of Treachery, on the surface of it, there's a couple ways that you could fix this card, right? There's a couple ways. One of the biggest problems with Agent of Treachery is that it doesn't have the word non-land on it. Wizards learned a long time ago that making it too easy to screw with people's lands, like a la land destruction, creates very unfun and unbalanced games. So having cheap access to cards that can mess with your opponent's lands can create a really unfair advantage very rapidly. And that's why so many cards now have the phrase non-land. An Agent of Treachery absolutely needed to say non-land. Being able to cheat out Agent of Treachery and have it take any permanent makes it too crippling, right? Like, the fact that you can cheat it on the first place is rough, but depending on the circumstances, can be acceptable, where you go, okay, that's just good, but it's not overbearing and overpowered. But when Agent of Treachery comes out, it's going to take your best threat, unless your board position isn't developed enough that you have something worth taking. Instead, in that situation, they'll turn around and take one of your lands, which cripples you even further, because the board state was in a situation where the player with the Agent of Treachery didn't even feel the need to take your best permanent. Instead, that just becomes yoink a land. And not only does that slow you down, but that speeds them up as well, because Agent of Treachery has that bonkers second part where it's like, oh, by the way, if you've managed to swipe a number of permanents, you also get to draw additional cards. And like that feels tacked on. So Agent of Treachery should have had non-land on it, or they could have experimented with making it more along the lines of the old school blue enchantments, where for as long as the creature's enchanted, you get it. So in the case of Agent of Treachery, it would basically be like gain control of this creature for as long as Agent of Treachery is on the board. Once Agent goes, they get their permanents back. Because Agent of Treachery is only a 2/3, that's not that hard to answer, a 2/3 that doesn't have hexproof or anything like that, right? So getting rid of the Agent of Treachery and getting your permanents back would have definitely put the power level down there. So they're aware of this non-land thing. Putting non-land on the card was an intentional idea to try and make the card more powerful. And it succeeded. But unfortunately, there's just too many cheat your cards out, right? We have Winota and Luca as prime examples of those. And again, these are cards that let you skirt around the normal balancing of Magic, and that leads to problems. So let's see what they say here in the article about getting rid of the Agent of Treachery. It says, recently we've seen a rise in archetypes that use either Luca, Coppercoat Outcast, or Winota Joiner of Forces to put Agent of Treachery directly into play. While part of the design intent of these cards was to provide creative ways to deploy powerful, high mana cost creatures, we've observed that using them to play an early Agent of Treachery can be uniquely frustrating to play against and difficult to come back from. 100% true. The effect of stealing any lands or key cards when at a high play rate reduces diversity in the metagame. Decks built around unique permanents or big creatures have less chance to succeed when opponents can steal their key cards without specific deck building intent. That's an interesting phrase. Specific deck building intent. It's just basically saying it's too universal of an answer. That's how I look at it. Therefore, in order to allow for more comeback potential against Luca and Winota decks, and to promote deck building diversity and standard, Agent of Treachery is banned. It's interesting to note that they're really talking a lot about having a variety of lines of play in standard. You can see that the amount of homogenization that's happened and concentration of very particular strategies and concepts has caused standard to feel like it has virtually no variety to people. And you can see that. You can see that in a number of ways. There is a lot of discontent being shared online overall about this. Now, when it comes to historic, it's actually really straightforward and simple. They're just going ahead and basically putting these cards on the, like the, what's the term they use for it now? I completely forget. It's, what is it? Come on now. Suspending. It's weird to me. I'm used to restricting, banning, and the rest. It's suspending. So they're suspending these cards, which means for the time being, you won't be able to use them in historic, but they're on probation, so they might be allowed to return. That's how that works, all right? And in terms of how this ban affects you if you have a Magic Arena account, you will actually get wild cards for every copy you have of both of these cards. So if you have 4 Fires of Invention, you're going to get 4 wild cards. And if you have 4 of the Agent of Treachery, you're going to get another 4 rare wild cards. And if you don't have those cards and you have an Arena account, what you want to do now is go and spend your wild cards to get those cards. Buy yourself a playset of each, because you're going to get them replaced when this happens on June 4th, right? Because that's the next update. So this doesn't actually go into effect for a couple days. Go and buy all those cards, and that way you'll have 0 chance of having to worry about ever getting them out of a booster, even though Wizards will have reprogrammed. Basically how it works with this is when they do a ban like this, they reprogram the booster packs so that the banned cards show up as the last rares. So whenever you're going to open a pack, if you would get one of the banned cards, instead it would replace it with another rare from the set you'd already have, and it will only give you the actual like Agent of Treachery or Fires of Invention if you literally have every single other rare from the set. So that would, you know, you randomly sometimes find they have these packs on sale in the store or something like that. You might get them from the Mastery Pass. The last thing you want is to get a banned card as a rare to your pack when you can just grab them for free. And then if they turn out to be unsuspended in historic, you've also got them to use, or any other format that Wizards may come up with that you can still use the stuff in. So that's just my advice. I don't know. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below, my friends. I'm going to be doing another video today, hopefully it'll come out today, talking about some leaked information about Core 2021. I've got leaked information and confirmed information, both of them together, a bunch of stuff you probably haven't heard yet. So come on back for that. If you enjoy what I'm doing, hit the like and do the subscribing and all that. It's great for the channel. YouTube loves that for the metrics, all those good times. And you know what? This channel is community funded. So if you like what I'm doing, hop on my Patreon and you know what? Do what these good people who are scrolling by on the screen are doing. Thanks for coming by, my friends. I'll see you all soon.